Night work suited her because the world softened after dark. The rescue compound breathed slower, animals settled, and the wind carried fewer sounds. She moved between enclosures with a headlamp, low, never startling, never rushing. The cubs watched her. From the moment she appeared, not because she demanded attention but because she was consistent. Same steps, same pauses, same quiet presence. Every night, they were young enough to still believe the world was safe, old enough to know it could disappear. Without warning, she understood that balance, and never lied to them. Shy cleaned their space carefully, hands, steady voice low. She spoke even when they did not understand the words. Tone mattered more than meaning. They learned her scent before they learned her face, learned the sound of her boots on gravel, learned that when she stopped walking, something important was about to happen. Other workers came and went, some were loud, some impatient, some afraid of the cubs' strength even at that age. The cubs noticed everything with her. They stayed calm, their breathing slowed when she sat nearby. Their restless pacing eased when she leaned against the fence. Rules said no attachment. Rules said prepare them for release, not reliance, but rules did not sit awake at night listening to small bodies shift in sleep. She never named them names, made endings harder. Instead, she counted them with her eyes. Every time she entered 1, 2, 3, always 3. She checked without thinking, a habit born from fear of loss, fear of silence where sound should be sometimes. She imagined the future: wide land, open sky, no fences. The cubs grown strong and gone. Those thoughts hurt, so she focused on the present, on feed schedules, on medical charts, on routine. Routine built safety. That night felt like any other at first. The air warmed, the stars hidden behind thin cloud. Crickets loud enough to drown distant roads. She did not know then that this was the last normal night, that soon her voice would matter. More than training, that instinct would rise to meet trust. For now, she walked the path between enclosures, unaware of how closely she was being studied, unaware that the cubs were already lining themselves to her movements. Morning arrived, harsh and fast. Heat pressed down early, and the air felt tight. She noticed it while checking water levels, and thought nothing of it. The cubs were restless. They ate slower, lifted their heads more often, ears turning toward sounds she could not yet hear. Their mother had been found weeks earlier, too late to help. The report was clinical, detached, finished in a single page. But the cubs carried it in their bodies. They searched for something missing. She saw it in the way they watched the tree line, in the way they leaned toward any movement. Protocol said limit contact, encourage independence, reduce human presence. She followed it on paper. In reality, she stayed nearby. Not touching, not interfering, simply present. Presence was not forbidden. She ran drills with them, without calling them drills, walking the perimeter, stopping suddenly, changing direction. They mirrored her without being asked. When she crouched, they crouched. When she waited, they waited. It started as play, and became hubata. Truck backfired. Near the road, the cubs flinched, pressed together. She did not raise her voice. She spoke softly, the same words she always used. Easy now, you are fine. The sound grounded the mother. Staff noticed the connection. Some warned her to pull back. Others watched, quietly unsure what they were seeing. She filed reports and signed forms, checked boxes that did not capture reality. Trust could not be documented. That afternoon, smoke appeared far on the horizon. A thin line, easy to ignore. She stared longer than necessary. Experience told her fire moved faster than people believed, and animals felt it before anyone else. The cubs paced. Short, fast steps, then stillness, a rhythm of tension building. She adjusted gaits, cleared paths without explanation. Preparation felt safer than hope. As evening approached, the sky turned an unfamiliar color, not dark, not light, but wrong. The cubs gathered near her position. They did not scatter. They did not hide. They waited. Something had shifted. A line crossed quietly without ceremony from care to command. She felt it settle on her shoulders, heavy but natural, like something she had been training for without knowing. When night fell, she stayed with them longer than scheduled, listening to distant sounds drawing closer. She did not leave, and they did not ask. Her tooth of fire came faster than anyone expected. Flames licked the edges of the reserve, sending smoke curling into the sky. The wind carried it like a warning. The cubs stiffened, ears flat, eyes wide. They sniffed the air as if it carried secrets only they could read. People shouted orders from a distance. Engines roared and tires crunched on gravel. Chaos bloomed around them. She moved calmly through the panic, her hands steady, her eyes scanning the perimeter. She knew running would scatter them. The cubs hesitated, then followed. Small bodies pressed close, sensing her certainty. Instinct intertwined with trust. Branches fell, sparks hissed nearby. She did not falter. Her voice, low, soft, repeated the words. They already knew stay close. One cub brushed her leg, another aligned behind the first movement, became a single rhythm. Her pace dictated safety. Smoke thickened, shadows shifted even as danger rose around them. They trusted her completely. No leash, no barrier, only presence and command. A line had been drawn, and they would not cross it without her. The world narrowed to her voice. Her steps, their formation, the night had become theirs to navigate together. She said, "Stay close." The words were not loud, but they carried authority. The cubs froze mid-step, eyes flicked toward, her body posture rigid, alert, small bodies tense, but ready. They moved in unison behind her, not as pets, not as helpless creatures, but as soldiers following a commander they trusted without question. Branches snapped underfoot, sparks danced. Dangerously close, she kept moving forward, every step measured, every glance intentional, her voice a lifeline. The cubs mirrored her perfectly. One after another, small paws landing quietly on burnt grass, they aligned shoulder to shoulder, their formation precise. Even the smallest one managed to keep pace. Smoke burned in her eyes. Ash fell like rain. She did not blink or flinch. Her presence became their shield. People on the periphery stopped, watched in disbelief. A woman leading cubs through chaos, not panicked, not frantic, only calm and unstoppable. She guided them past fallen trees and hidden embers. The cubs shifted fluidly when the path narrowed. They anticipated her movements. Without hesitation for a moment, the world narrowed to them. Her breath, the cubs breathing, her steps, the cubs following. They were connected without words, without hesitation, a bond forged in quiet nights of care, and now tested by fire. She led, and they obeyed. Instinct and trust, merging into one unstoppable force. When she paused, they paused. When she ducked, they ducked. Every action a message, stay close, and they did. The line of cubs behind her stretched like a living shadow, small muscles coiled under fur, eyes sharp and bright in the smoky light, each movement synchronized with hers, instinct and training fused. She felt their presence pressing close, like a second skin, comforting and fierce. At the same time, her voice remained low, steady, repeating the command they knew best, stay close. The ground beneath them shifted unpredictably. Burnt branches snapped underfoot, embers sparked and fell. Yet the cubs did not scatter, not one turned away, not one lost focus. She led them around fallen trees, through narrow paths. They slipped through gaps, barely wide enough, bodies pressed together, instinct guiding them. She had never seen anything so precise, so disciplined, yet alive. A sudden crack of fire somewhere behind them made the cubs flinch. She did not panic. Instead, she slowed her steps. Her hands extended lightly to guide the nearest ones forward. The smallest brushed her sleeve as if seeking reassurance. The world outside became a blur of noise and light, shouts, engines, smoke, and heat pressed from all sides. Inside the line of cubs there was only rhythm and focus. Her rhythm. People watching stopped in awe. Some thought it impossible. A human leading wild cubs through danger, not with fear but with authority, not with force but with trust. The cubs moved as one, following her feet, following her voice. Every small step a proof of their bond, every eye fixed on her, every heartbeat synced with hers. She felt the weight of responsibility, heavy but right. They would not survive without her, and she would not fail them. The fire pressed closer now, heat radiating through the smoke, thick and suffocating. She could taste ash on her tongue, feel it clinging to her skin. The cubs moved like shadows, pressed to her back. Their small bodies taut and alert. She adjusted her pace, careful to keep them together, each step deliberate, each glance scanning the path ahead. The world was chaos, but within their line there was order. A fragile order built on trust and instinct. One cub slipped slightly on scorched earth. She extended her hand, guiding it forward. It pressed against her side briefly before falling back into formation. Another yipped softly as a spark flared nearby. She murmured, "Easy now," and the sound steadied them. Their movements flowed around her like water following a riverbed. Branches fell in her path, embers crackled in the grass. She felt the heat lick at her skin but did not falter. Her eyes swept constantly, checking every shadow, every sound. The cubs mirrored her perfectly, every pause, every turn, executed without hesitation, their training unspoken, their loyalty unquestioned. She thought of the nights she had spent caring for them, feeding, cleaning, watching. Every small detail had led to this. Every quiet moment had prepared them for this moment. The cubs were no longer just animals. They were a unit, a team, responding to her signal and presence, a bond forged in fear and nurtured in trust. Smoke thickened and stung her eyes. She blinked once, then caught the smallest one, looking up for reassurance. She smiled briefly and whispered, "Stay close." The cub pressed its head to her leg, and the others shifted tighter. It was not obedience, it was choice. A choice born from absolute faith. Far ahead, she glimpsed the edge of the safe zone. Her heart raced. Not with fear but with determination. She would get them through. The cubs sensed it to their movements. Sharp, precise, confident, even in danger they followed. Without hesitation, they emerged from the worst of the flames, bodies dusted with ash, eyes bright and alert. She stopped, finally breathing heavy. The cubs pressed in around her, their small bodies, a living shield. Not one had strayed, not one had faltered. The fire was behind them, but the bond they had formed would never be behind them. It had taken shape in motion, in trust in the word she had spoken, again and again. Stay close, and they had. They were more than survivors. Now they were a unit. A line forged in fire, following her forever. The smoke began to thin, revealing charred ground and twisted trees. The cubs moved close to her, as if the world beyond still held threat. Every paw step, silent alert, every eye tracking her movements. Rescue teams appeared at the edge of the clearing. Voices shouted, orders, engines hummed, and ropes rustled. People froze when they saw them. A woman leading cubs through danger, like a commander through soldiers. She did not pause. Her focus remained forward. The cubs mirrored her every step. No hesitation, no fear. They were bound to her presence there. Trust unshakable. One of the rescuers stepped forward slowly, hands raised in caution. The cubs flinched briefly but stayed in formation. She whispered, stay close. The small bodies pressed tighter against her. The team could not believe it. They had read reports of animals following humans, but nothing like this. A line of wild cubs, moving in perfect sync behind a single woman. Order emerging from chaos, without chains, without leashes, only instinct and trust. She guided the cubs past the teams, slowly, cautiously, until the danger of the fire was behind them. Not one cub strayed, not one faltered. Finally, she stopped breathing, heavy smoke clinging to hair and skin. The cubs huddled near her legs, small eyes, bright, alert but calm. They had survived. Together the rescuers stepped back silently. They watched in awe, a living testament to connection, to loyalty, to the quiet power of a single command. Stay close. And the cubs they had followed, they had believed, and they had survived. The fire had passed, leaving the reserve scarred and silent, the air still thick with smoke and ash. But within the line of cubs there was calm. A fragile calm born from trust. She knelt slowly, letting the cubs gather around her, their small bodies pressed close, eyes fixed on her. She whispered, easy now, the words simple but full of meaning. They had followed her through chaos. They had survived because they had stayed close. The rescuers circled at a distance, silent now, unsure how to react. The sight was unlike anything they had ever witnessed. Wild animals responding to human command, not with fear but with complete trust. It was rare, impossible for many to comprehend. She checked each one carefully, brushing ash from fur, running hands gently over small limbs. Their breathing slowed as hers did. Harmony returned in small increments. The world was dangerous still, but in that moment safety existed. Stories would spread of what had happened. But not because it was spectacular or heroic. It would spread because it was true, because connection had crossed species, because trust had endured fire and chaos. She rose finally. The cubs fell in line behind her once more. Not out of fear, not out of habit, but because they chose to. Her presence alone got them a living signal of safety. Long after the smoke cleared, the bond would remain silent, unspoken, strong, and enduring. A reminder that sometimes the simplest command carries the greatest power. Stay close. And they did. Weeks passed, and the reserve began to heal. Charred trees still stood as silent witnesses to the fire. The cubs had grown stronger. Their muscles leaned, their eyes sharper, but their trust in her remained unchanged. She prepared for the day they would be released, not forced but guided, every movement measured to ensure they were ready. She had watched them learn every nuance of survival, and they had learned well. On the morning of release, she opened the gates slowly. The cubs paused briefly at the threshold, then glanced back at her, a silent question. She smiled and whispered, stay close. They moved together as one. But when the moment came, they stepped into the wild. The first moments were cautious. Each step into tall grass, a negotiation. Her eyes never left them, and theirs never left her. Even as the distance grew, the bond remained invisible but unbreakable. Visitors would come later, asking about the cubs. Staff would recount the story again and again, not because of the fire, not because of the chaos, but because of the connection, the discipline of wild creatures trusting a single human completely, the miracle of instinct and care aligning perfectly. She returned to her work quietly, no fanfare, no cameras, only routine and presence, and every night, when she walked through the enclosures, she remembered how they had moved behind her, not as pets, not as shadows, but as soldiers, as companions, bound by the quiet command of a single phrase, stay close, and they had survived, they had learned, they had trusted. The cubs were gone now, but the story of their line formed behind her in the darkest smoke, and the fiercest fire remained alive in the memory of everyone who had witnessed it, a testament to loyalty, instinct, and the unspoken power of connection. She carried it with her always, and it carried them too.